Hello, monks I used to know, nuns I used to know, ex-monks I used to know, ex-nuns I used to know, lay people visiting our monasteries I used to know. Seems like I haven't been in touch with almost anyone for a long time uh, in my kind of circles from my monastic years. So I just thought, I just want to say hello. I don't know if this is going to be 5 minutes or 50 minutes, probably somewhere in between. Um, I'm at home. Elizabeth is at home. It's a beautiful spring day. Um, I think about you all quite a lot more than I contact all of you. Those of you who are on Facebook, I follow a little bit, but no monks there. There's perhaps a certain gravitas to the occasion. Uh, I was kind of lightheartedly the other day saying that, no, I won't even go there. I disrobed in 2008, so it's coming up to 12 years now. And the first few years, as many of you know, were quite confused and difficult. I was clinically depressed for a good 2 years. And then professional life slowly evolved, quite outside of my control as far as I could see. And that gave me some bearings. And then Elizabeth happened, and that did a lot. So I've stayed with Elizabeth for 10 years now. We married in our garden here 5 years ago. And I make a living sharing what I learned and experienced as a monk. Many of you have kind of waved in cyberspace, and there's been a growing amount of waving in cyberspace for various reasons. And I'm growing increasingly inept, inadequate to respond for various reasons too. So I'll respond here. I've become a public person in the last 5 years in Sweden, or 6, 7 years. And so there's a lot of how are you doing? So for those of you who don't know, I was diagnosed with ALS maybe 20 months ago, strangely enough on the 11th of September of 2018. Yeah, that was a trip. Aside from all the kind of grief around it, it was a very sweet moment. You know, I sat with a doctor and she explained to me. I'd done lots of tests in the summer of 2018, and like many people do these days, I Google symptoms. And so I knew the kind of worst case scenario was ALS. And the doctor told me that was all likelihood it, but she needed another, test to make sure. But we both knew that that's it. And then I kind of held it together while I was with her in the doctor's office. But as soon as I left her room, I started crying very volcanically. And then I called a friend who stayed with me till I got in my car. And then thought I could manage. But, in the first roundabout from the hospital, I kind of broke down again and crying, so I shook. But I kind of called another friend and he kept me company. And then I was just like 10 minutes from home. And kind of this crying stopped fairly kind of suddenly. And so I said, I'm fine now, actually, we can put the phone down. And, I continued driving towards home. I was sitting there feeling, I don't know if you recognize this feeling, like if you've had a really good cry, you can feel quite released, cleansed. I do anyway, on a good day. So it's very kind of in my body, sense, the steering wheel and the chair I was sitting in, and there was a lot of stillness inside. So I just sat in that and enjoyed that. And then something just wanted to say something to me from inside. So something kind of arose and said, you've lived a really good life. You've gotten all the encouragement one can ask for, hope for. to live a good life for a long time now. It's what? Almost 30 years since I became a monk. You don't have many big regrets or things you can't set straight, or, people you've deceived or manipulated or hurt intentionally. So, your karmic luggage is light. And when your last breath comes, whether it's in a week, a month, a year, or 10 years, you'll be able to, go through that passage without much fear. And it was so sweet, it certainly wasn't me speaking. It certainly wasn't ego speaking. Something from the inside just wanted to remind me that there was not much to worry about as far as death is concerned. If that sounds dramatic, it was a very lovely, wonderful moment for me. A kind of, almost like a receipt, The universe gave me a receipt. Trying to live, with integrity, trying to avoid doing and saying things that are not good or wholesome. It's worth the effort. Sorry if I sound, I don't know, full of myself when I say that. It wasn't on that level at all. For those of you who don't know, ALS, it's a neurological disease. A certain kind of nerve cells, they go bananas and they stop sending signals. Well, they actually disappear. The modern medicine doesn't quite know why. They disappear, and they have the special assignment of telling the muscles what to do. So your muscles don't get signals, so your muscles atrophy. And slowly, first you can't walk, then you can't stand, then you can't really breathe. And then the most common way of passing is while in your sleep. You're not ventilating enough, so you kind of accumulate carbon dioxide in your lungs, and you die from too much carbon dioxide in your lungs. So it can be a fairly pain-free way of going. But of course, all the stages leading up to that, everything that's slowly taken away from you. So I've sat myself cross-legged now because it just seemed nice to do, speaking to you, because you're my cross-legged friends. But it's a fairly humbling experience trying to get up from cross-legged, because I have to crawl over to an armchair and slowly hoist myself into the armchair, and then I take the armrests and hoist myself up standing. So I fall a lot because my legs are really weak, and if I'm on my own and I fall, I can't get up. And now I'm so weak so that Elizabeth can't get me up either, because she has to carry pretty much all the weight. So I have a wheelchair, but I avoid using it unless we're out for a walk and I just want to be able to do a bit more. I can walk maybe 100 meters. My hands are very poorly. Everything is difficult with my hands. I can't cook. I can hardly empty or fill the dishwasher. I have to do everything with 2 hands. Hold the teacup, 2 hands. Flip the newspapers. Pages, difficult but manageable. Computer keyboards, I have 2 fingers that still work well enough to use on a keyboard. There are 2 ways ALS hits people. One is like it starts with speaking and swallowing in the head. And the other way is starts with the extremities. I got the second kind, which starts with the extremities, which I'm really thankful for, because, I like to talk, that. And it's just not so brutal not having your communications channels cut off like that. It's weird. I was on a speaking tour in Sweden for the last year. And it's quite enjoyable. It was the first thing I did after the diagnosis. I just set up this national 1-year speaking tour. Well, first I thought it'd be for 3 months, but then there was so much interest, so did another 3 months after summer, and still so much interest, another 3 months. It ended up a year. Over 20,000 people came to listen in 40 venues, 25 towns. The big towns in Sweden I just did again and again and again. I did 8 gigs in my hometown, 700 people each time. Did perhaps 7 gigs in Stockholm, 900 people every time. Why am I saying that? Something I wanted to say. Yeah, my brain works poorly in those levels. Funny scenes while you're on tour. Basically I can't handle zippers or buttons or shoelaces at all anymore. So, you kind of put your trousers on as far as you can and, put your arms into the sleeves of the shirt. And then I hear the sounds of a vacuum cleaner in the hotel corridor, and I find a Thai cleaning lady in one of the hotel rooms that, sorry, I noticed this, I can understand this looks a bit weird. It's just that my hands don't work. Could you please help button my shirt and do the button on my trousers? And she just laughed and enjoyed speaking Thai with somebody for a while. Why was I speaking about the speaking tour? I don't know. Well, anyway, that's what happened. And statistically, for those people so inclined, pretty much half the people who get the diagnosis ALS, they're dead within 18 months. I registered that, and now 20 months have passed, so I'm very happy to still be here. Very happy to be reasonably independent still. Have a kind of elevator, stair elevator, so I can get between the two floors. I can barely push the button on my electrical toothbrush. Manual toothbrushing is out. I try to help with the dish filling and emptying the dishwasher, but yeah, there's a lot of porcelain that we consume, a lot of porcelain, let's just say that. A fair amount of glass too. I can still eat, although my table manners are horrible because I can't really hold on to the cutlery very well. And I've been surprised at how stable, balanced, rustic I've been able to live with this new truth and this kind of deteriorating body. And that's, of course, largely thanks to the years with you all. So it's nice to also acknowledge that. Myself and the people around me have been kind of surprised. You really seem to handle this well and not fall into a kind of black hole of despair from it. And I haven't really done that. Of course, there was lots of grieving. There are good reasons to grieve, and Elizabeth and I had our fair share. It's quite sweet, how grieving works. Kind of got home and, like we'd grieve in tandem. Like I told her the diagnosis and she knew much better than I do what that meant because she's much more knowledgeable about health. And so, maybe she went into a volcanic cry. And when that slowly petered out, then, she's kind of back to a more level-headed state. And then there's room for me to break down. So we did that for like 2.5 days. A lot of our waking time, we just cried, just let it rip through, not really holding back or being shy. And, we voiced our concerns. I had so much looked forward to seeing my bonus children. In Sweden, we have this wonderful word, bonus children. Elizabeth's children are my bonus children, and they're lovely. And they're 27 and 29. They're going to have kids soon, all going well. And I was looking forward to be part of that. And I was looking forward to growing old with Elizabeth. We have a wonderful garden, thanks to Elizabeth. We have an exceptionally beautiful house inside, thanks to Elizabeth. So, the grief of what might not come to be. And that feels healthy. But there was nothing worse, no conscious fear of death. Yeah, the dying process to some extent. I got pneumonia when I was in Costa Rica in December, and that was absolutely horrible. Ended up with an ambulance airplane across Costa Rica, and I was pretty out of it when I came to the hospital, and breathing was very labored. And the doctors kind of, we're glad you got here in time. Had you come a bit later, we don't know how it would have ended up. So I kind of stayed in the hospital for a week in Costa Rica. Then I got home, and then in February I started doing a few gigs on the tour, and then I got pneumonia again. Same thing there. I was staying with my mother in Stockholm. I was getting sicker and sicker and sicker, and then one night at 3 o'clock in the morning, I had to call 112 or whatever it's called, emergency. And same thing there, breathing was very labored. I was getting panicked about not getting any air. But I stayed a week in hospital and I was all right again. But of course, reduced. And the doctors in Stockholm, they said, try to avoid getting pneumonia again because your body, your system isn't really strong enough. And I was joking to somebody, it's like, God must hate me. And then God invented Corona. It's like my nightmare kind of epidemic. Because, of course, I have some recent memories of what it's like to suffocate and laying down and not being able to breathe. And being so weak, I've lost 40 pounds, 20 kilos in the last year. Last year. So my breathing is very reduced. I guess I have about 30% left. I do daily, I have a little thingy that I practice with to keep my diaphragm, from atrophying totally. You can also hear on my voice, I'm sure you can hear that the voice is slowly fading. So better to do this while I still have a voice. It hasn't always been an easy process with Elizabeth also, of course. Things get very charged in a situation like this. And it's funny, it's just like since quarantine, and I was joking, God hates me because he invented Corona. Because it's so obvious, I don't stand a chance. If I get Corona, it's, checkmate. And so we're really careful. I don't get closer than 10 feet away from any other person. I don't leave our house or our garden. I'm really glad Corona hit in the springtime and not in the autumn. We do a lot of our shopping online, and if something has to be done outside, Elizabeth does it, and she's very conscious of, all the ways you have to protect yourself when you're out amongst people. We've been in this quarantine state for 6 weeks, I think now. And it's a really nice love vibe, Because I'm so reduced physically, she has to do pretty much everything. And I'm sure you can imagine keeping a house clean. We used to get help cleaning, but now when Corona hit, we don't do that anymore because, you don't want anybody in your house. And so she does all the cleaning, she does all the cooking, and we're home, everybody, both of us, every day, all day. So it's like 3 meals a day. There's the garden, most of the washing up. It's a lot. I have 2 fingers that are still functional on a keyboard. So I do like family finances and pay the bills and stuff like that. And actually, it's quite a lot of administration just being sick. Getting a wheelchair entails a lot of emails. Getting an elevator that takes you between the floors of your house. First of all, it's damn expensive, and the Swedish welfare state isn't what it used to be. And it takes a lot of emails. Getting a handicap parking permit takes a lot of emails. I can walk about 100 meters now on flat ground. I can't really do uneven ground or going up or going down. If I have to, I can do 1 flight of stairs if there's a good banner to hold on to. I can still swallow well enough. Getting up out of sofas is hard, but I can still do it if they're not too low. I can still get the electrical toothbrush going. As you may hear after a while, I'm a bit foggy in the head. You'll notice I may repeat stuff. It happens. It affects the mental bit in ways I haven't really figured out. Probably has to do with breathing, because my breathing is so poor, because the diaphragm is a muscle, of course, which drives breathing. I continuously have way too much carbon dioxide in my lungs. I'm not ventilating well. So at night, that's a hassle. I get these majestic headaches most mornings, because when you lay down, it's for some reason harder to breathe. I noticed that when I had pneumonia. And probably also because you're sleeping, so you're not ventilating so well, so you build up carbon dioxide in your lungs, or however it works. And then I wake up real severe headaches. I still get up really early, 4 or 5 o'clock. So first hour I just kind of sit and breathe and try to ventilate so that I get rid of the headache. Happy to say that meditation is still very much part of my life. I was lucky in the woman I met, so we share that. So for a few years now, every morning, pretty much no matter what, we sit for half an hour together. I do 1 or 2 retreats every year, usually with Adyashanti. Listen more than I read spiritual stuff. I don't feel I need to consume that. As long as I work, it was my way of getting ready for a gig, was just to, if I'm in my car, I'd sit there and listen to Adyashanti. If I'm out walking, often I try to get a 3-hour walk in nature. When I still could do those things, I'd listen for an hour and then switch off and just see what comes up. And of course, thanks to the way I lived with you all, the way we lived, the way the Buddha encouraged monks and nuns to live, you didn't get away very long from reflections around death and the impermanence of life. And, that seeped in better than I might have thought, because it's really there now. I know it is like, some people have kind of said, I'm surprised you haven't gotten angry, doesn't it feel unfair? It's like, unfair. So when did I ever get a promise that I'd get to live to a ripe old age? So isn't it unfair that it happens to you? You lived a fairly good life. Well, it's no guarantees, is it? Very sweet. Many people, they responded in that way. It's not fair. It shouldn't be you. The world needs more of the kind of things you stand for and talk about. And then several of them said, and then I thought some more, and I thought, well, why not Natthiko, Björn? You might be better prepared than most to deal with what it's like, to die before you reach your ripe old age. Also notice in my professional life, not a talk goes by, not a corporate gig goes by, not a meditation retreat goes by, not one of these open evenings in the tour goes by, without me mentioning some of you. The ones I mention more regularly are, of course, the monks, nuns that I lived with and were my teachers. Kind of Ajahn Pasano, Ajahn Jayasaro always have their stories in every talk. With Ajahn Sucitto, there's so many stories I like to tell, so I have to hold back, restrain myself from giving more than 1 or 2 Ajahn Sucitto stories in a talk. My Lumpo Sumero stories are also plenty. My Ajahn Tanya stories are always in the talk. So, in some strange, weird way, a lot of Swedish people have heard about you, understood a bit more what our life was like and what we gave importance through my working life here in Sweden. And I know I'm pretty poor at being in touch. It's a fairly poor excuse that I've become a kind of celebrity or a somewhat public person, but I don't deal well with complexity. I never have. And now it's worse than ever, and my brain capacity is deteriorating too. So I kind of, something in me locks. I get locked in when life gets too complicated. So I'm sorry for not having responded to individuals' inquiries about my welfare. Sorry about that. So I do this like this now instead. It works for me. And yeah, there's also that sense of gravitas I think I mentioned, that I might not see you all again. I might not talk to you all again. I might not write to you all again. Ajankema Siri and Ajahn Suchito I keep in touch with. The rest of you I haven't been keeping in touch with. So thank you for having been in my life. I think we can all agree on how mysterious ways we all learn. I find it hard to say even now in the rearview mirror how have I learned things. But certainly most of my learning has happened through just living with you and watching how you all deal with daily life, especially when it's difficult in our monasteries. Snippets of wisdom that have just kind of somebody said them at a time in a place where I needed them and had a room for them. I experience a lot of gratitude now. I guess that's a bit of a cliche when you get signals that your life is not going to be as long as you expected or hoped. And one of the many things that come up in terms of gratitude is just, yeah, like I said, I've lived well. Thanks to you all, I was surrounded by wise, gentle human beings for 17 years. And yes, we were not wise, all of us, all of the time. And yes, we were not gentle, all of us, all of the time. But a good share. A good share of us, a good share of the time. Enough to have nice examples around me all the time. Almost like on an aesthetic level, the beauty of integrity. It's beautiful to see somebody who is patient when there is good reason to be impatient. It's beautiful to see somebody who can be restrained where there seemed to be ample reason to be irritated, annoyed, pissed off. The little gestures, especially all of you, me, all of us who weren't really teachers, the gestures we made for each other, the time we gave each other. I don't know if it seems like I'm somebody who expects to be welcome everywhere, but that's not how I feel. So I look at the time my teachers gave me, for example, Ajahn Pasano, Ajahn Jayasaro, Ajahn Suchito, Ajahn Sumero. You always gave me time, and I relished those times. Awkward as I could feel asking for the time, awkward as I could feel getting the time, I relished it, and I learned a lot. Yeah, it filled me up on levels I don't quite understand. Ajahn Tanya's spooky ability to sense how I was feeling without me having to explain very much, saying a few brief words that always hit the spot. So I'm tired. It's been a long day here. Been hanging out with friends, 10 feet apart, sitting outside, freezing, drinking tea. That's the way we hang out now. I notice my brain is mushy. It's so easy to go into particulars, but it'd be almost endless, starting to thank monks and nuns individually. And also I'm concerned about forgetting some names. Nobody I've lived with has not been my teacher at one point or another. Thank you for putting up with me all those years. Thank you to the monasteries for being such generous places. There's enough room and space to kind of figure out your own way. To me, they didn't feel tight, perhaps in the beginning. That's because I was so tightly wound. There's room to experiment. There's room to try out different methods and perspectives. Thank you for not being elitist. I always cherished that sense that, you didn't have to be particularly intelligent or gifted or together to be part of our Sangha. I always liked that. Thank you for giving me an orientation. It took a long while. I really did. How do I say that? I took a long time recognizing that sharp, one-pointed samadhi was never going to be my thing. Thank you for Lung Po for speaking up for pure awareness or intuitive awareness so early, so often, so unabashedly. It's been my lifesaver. I notice in the morning sits, it's just what I come back to. Even in daily life, it's what I come back to. Like these days, I often walk around, okay, so when I'm dead, what is not going to be around anymore? Well, all these sights, sounds, thoughts, bodily sensations, tastes, smells, motions, feelings. What's left when none of that's there anymore? Very sweet space. Who knows how it happens when you die, but I'm pretty confident that that is the refuge for me. I even invented a word. There was no good word in Swedish to distinguish between consciousness and awareness. So I made one up, and it's kind of taken root now. And as you're well aware, many non-monastic teachers, they speak in those terms. Myself, I'm quite taken with Adyashanti and Eckhart Tolle and Rupert Spira. They speak like that. This is my second recording. I did one first where I ended up making a lot of sounds, nervous sounds all the time. So I kind of said, no, I'm going to do this again. And now I have a feeling I've done some nervous sounds again, and I'm not quite sure what I've said in this round and in the first round. Never mind. I really just want to say thank you. It's important to me that if there are any regrets, if I've hurt somebody unknowingly, please forgive me. It's very rarely my intention, but it happens. So if I've hurt any of you, been clumsy, if you have kind of like reservations or things you're upset with still about me, so I'm sorry. My apologies. I'm very fallible and I'm very aware of how fallible I am. And I'd also like to say there's not a single person that I kind of met in my years as a monk, layperson or monastic or ex-monastic, that I feel any unfinished business with, none whatsoever. It's really nice. I have no unfinished business on the social level. Absolutely not. Nothing. I just want to make sure that people around me feel loved. Still. Just want to show love. It's the only thing left that makes any sense. Give and show love. I think I'm going to end there. So thank you for putting up with me, encouraging me, being examples to me, perhaps even being bad examples to me, some of you, some of the time. What do I know? Hard to find a case. Thank you for being part of the best decision I made in my life, the brightest years of my life in some ways, the most uncomplicated years of my life in some ways, the most gentle years of my life, the most formative years of my life, and the years that best prepared me for what's coming next. I honestly don't think I'll see next summer, because even if COVID doesn't get me, my breathing is deteriorating at a pace that, yeah, it's always good to leave a door open for miracles, but kind of rational, statistical assessment would be, yeah, it's happening, and that's all right. Thank you very much.